Listen to me carefully, because what happened on British Airways Flight 111 from London to New York was never reported in the news. A commercial flight at 35,000 feet became a powder keg when the 6-month-old heir to the most ruthless syndicate in Europe wouldn't stop screaming. The flight attendants were terrified. The armed guards pacing the aisles were ready to snap, and the Don himself was losing his mind. But the real story isn't the mafia boss or his men. It's about a desperate single mother in seat 2A who stood up, bypassed the guns, and committed an act so unthinkable, so deeply intimate, it brought a monster to his knees and changed the underworld forever. The heavy rain of London battered the massive windows of Heathrow's Terminal 5. Chloe Davis sat in the plush departure lounge, clutching a lukewarm cup of tea, her eyes heavy with an exhaustion that settled deep into her bones. At 28, she was a single mother to a 2-year-old girl, Lily, who was currently back in New York with Chloe's mother. Chloe had spent the last 3 days in London interviewing for a corporate interior design firm, a desperate bid to double her income and finally move out of their cramped Queens apartment. By some administrative miracle, a massive overbooking error had bumped Chloe from her cramped economy seat into first class on the Boeing 777-300ER. She should have been thrilled. The suite was a marvel of modern aviation, complete with privacy doors, a lie-flat bed, and unlimited champagne. But as she settled into seat 2A, a strange, suffocating tension began to bleed into the cabin. It started with the flight attendants. The usually composed, smiling women in their tailored uniforms suddenly looked pale and rigid. Whispers, frantic and hushed, exchanged hands in the galley. Then, they boarded. 4 men filed into the first-class cabin. They didn't look like wealthy businessmen or celebrities. They moved with the cold, calculated precision of apex predators. They wore bespoke Italian suits that failed to hide the heavy, unnatural bulges beneath their jackets. The 2 in the front took positions near the cockpit door, scanning the few other passengers with dead, unblinking eyes. Then came the man who commanded the room, Gabriel Rossi. He was breathtakingly handsome, but in a harsh, unforgiving way. Jet black hair, an angular jaw covered in dark stubble, and eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic sea. He radiated a dark, kinetic energy. The air around him seemed to crackle. He was the head of the Rossi Syndicate, a man whose legitimate shipping empire was nothing but a thin veil over a vast, violent underworld network. His private Gulfstream G650ER had been grounded at Farnborough Airport due to sudden mechanical failures, a blatant sabotage attempt by a rival family. Forced to flee the UK immediately, he had bought out the majority of this commercial first-class cabin. But the most shocking thing wasn't the dangerous men or Gabriel's terrifying presence. It was what Gabriel held in his arms. Strapped to the chest of this ruthless cartel boss was a designer baby carrier holding a tiny, fragile 6-month-old boy. The baby was Gabriel's nephew, Leo. Less than 48 hours ago, Gabriel's brother and sister-in-law had been gunned down in a brutal ambush in Milan. Gabriel had barely managed to pull the infant from the wreckage. Now he was smuggling the sole remaining heir of the Rossi bloodline to a fortified safe house in New York. As the plane pushed back from the gate, the baby began to fuss. It started as a low, pitiful whimper. Chloe, her maternal instincts hardwired by 2 years of single motherhood, felt a familiar tug in her chest. She watched from the corner of her eye as Gabriel awkwardly patted the baby's back, his large, scarred hands looking entirely out of place against the soft blue cotton of the infant's onesie. 10 minutes into the flight, as the plane broke through the heavy London clouds, the whimper escalated into a cry. "Dante!" Gabriel snapped, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that sent shivers down Chloe's spine. "Get the bottle, now!" A massive brute of a man fumbled with a sleek, temperature-controlled bag, producing a bottle of pre-mixed formula. He handed it to Gabriel, who pressed it to the baby's lips. Leo rejected it instantly. The baby turned his head, his face turning a deep, angry crimson, and let out a piercing, gut-wrenching shriek. It wasn't just a cry of annoyance. It was a scream of sheer distress. 30 minutes passed. The crying did not stop. It echoed off the curved walls of the cabin, drilling into the skulls of everyone present. The flight attendants hovered nervously at the edge of the cabin, too terrified of Gabriel's armed men to intervene. "Shh, Piccolo, quiet," Gabriel muttered, pacing the narrow aisle. His composure was unraveling. This was a man who could order the destruction of an entire city block without blinking. but he was completely powerless against a 6-month-old infant. An hour in, the crying turned into breathless, choking gasps. The baby was thrashing in Gabriel's arms, his tiny fists clenched. The tension in the cabin was volatile. Dante and the other men were exchanging nervous glances, their hands twitching near their holsters, as if they could shoot the noise out of the air. Chloe felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She recognized that cry. It wasn't just colic, and it wasn't just fear. The baby was starving, overtired, and desperately seeking the comfort of a mother who was no longer there. The artificial formula was cold, unfamiliar, and entirely wrong. She looked at Gabriel. The mafia boss's eyes were wild with a mix of fury and profound, hidden grief. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals were dangerous. Chloe knew she should mind her own business. She had her own daughter to get home to. But as another ragged, agonizing shriek tore from the baby's throat, a sound so full of pain it made her eyes water, Chloe made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. She unbuckled her seatbelt. The moment Chloe's seatbelt clicked, 4 pairs of dead, hostile eyes snapped to her. Dante immediately stepped forward, his hand slipping inside his suit jacket. "Sit down," Dante ordered, his accent thick and threatening. Chloe's legs trembled, but she forced herself to stand in the narrow aisle. She ignored the bodyguard and locked eyes with Gabriel Rossi. Up close, the sheer physical dominance of the man was overwhelming. He smelled of rain, expensive leather, and cordite. "What do you want?" Gabriel demanded, his voice a lethal whisper over the baby's screaming. "Sit back down before my men make you." "You're holding him wrong," Chloe said. Her voice wavered, but she forced steel into it. "He's inhaling too much air when he cries, which is giving him gas, which makes him cry harder. And he doesn't want that formula. It's the wrong temperature, and the nipple flow is too fast for him." Gabriel stared at her, genuinely stunned. In his world, people did not speak to him like this. They certainly didn't critique him. "Are you a doctor?" "I'm a mother," Chloe said softly, taking a step closer. The guards tensed, but Gabriel held up a single, commanding finger. The men froze. "He's starving," Chloe continued, her eyes dropping to the thrashing infant. "And he's terrified. He smells blood and stress on you. He needs something you can't give him right now." Gabriel's jaw ticked. The mention of blood hit too close to the raw, bleeding wound of his brother's death. "And you can?" he sneered, though the desperation in his eyes betrayed his arrogant tone. "My daughter is too," Chloe said, her heart hammering in her throat. She was about to cross a line from which there was no return. "I'm still weaning her. I can feed him, if you'll let me." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the first-class cabin, broken only by the baby's agonizing wails. Dante let out a low curse in Italian. The flight attendants in the galley gasped. Gabriel Rossi, the untouchable don of the Italian-American syndicate, looked at the fragile, exhausted woman in front of him. She was offering the most profound, intimate act of survival to a child that belonged to a world of death. "You would do that?" Gabriel asked, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "For a stranger's child?" "No child should suffer," Chloe replied simply. "Please, let me help him." Gabriel looked down at his nephew. Leo's face was turning purple, his breathing ragged. The boss's broad shoulders slumped, a momentary surrender to a power greater than his own. Slowly, carefully, he unclipped the carrier and lifted the screaming infant. He didn't hand the baby to her. Instead, he gestured to the empty, double-wide suite next to his. "Sit." Chloe moved to the seat. Gabriel sat beside her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. The guards formed a human wall in the aisle, turning their backs to give them privacy, effectively turning the suite into an impenetrable fortress. With trembling hands, Chloe unbuttoned the top of her blouse and unclasped her nursing bra. She draped a soft cashmere blanket, provided by the airline, over her shoulder. Gabriel, his face a mask of intense concentration and guarded vulnerability, gently passed the thrashing baby into her arms. The moment Chloe brought the infant to her chest, the transition was miraculous. Instinct took over for the child. The warmth, the softness, the steady heartbeat of a mother. It was the sanctuary he had been violently ripped away from. Within seconds, the screaming stopped. It was replaced by the soft, rhythmic sound of a baby nursing, followed by tiny, contented sighs. The silence that washed over the cabin was absolute. It was so profound, it was almost deafening. Chloe looked down at the dark-haired baby, tears pricking her eyes as she brushed a gentle finger over his tear-stained cheek. He was so small, so innocent, caught in a web of violence he couldn't comprehend. Then she looked up. Gabriel Rossi was staring at her. The cold, dead look of the mafia Don was gone. In its place was an expression of raw, unadulterated awe. He was looking at her not as a civilian, not as a woman in his way, but as a savior. The tension in his jaw relaxed, and for the first time since the flight began, he let out a long, shuddering breath. "Thank you," he whispered, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. Chloe just nodded, keeping her focus on the baby, acutely aware that she was half undressed in front of the most dangerous man she had ever met, surrounded by killers at 35,000 feet. She had done the unthinkable. She had pacified the mob boss's heir. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a new, creeping realization set in. She had just deeply involved herself in the affairs of the Rossi crime family. And men like Gabriel Rossi didn't just let loose ends walk away. For the next 4 hours, the flight was dead silent. Little Leo, exhausted from his trauma and satiated for the first time in 2 days, fell into a deep, unmovable sleep against Chloe's chest. She adjusted her clothing beneath the cashmere blanket, keeping the baby cradled securely. She didn't dare move to put him in the bassinet. The fear of waking him and restarting the nightmare kept her anchored to the seat. Gabriel remained seated next to her. He had ordered Dante to bring Chloe a fresh bottle of water and a plate of warm food, which she picked out with her free hand. The heavy, intimidating presence of the mafia boss had shifted into something else, something fiercely protective. "His name is Matteo," Gabriel said quietly, breaking the silence. The cabin lights had been dimmed, casting deep shadows across his sharp features. Chloe looked at him. "He's beautiful. Does his mother know he's safe?" She knew it was a dangerous question, but the intimacy of the situation made her bold. Gabriel's jaw tightened, the muscles ticking beneath his stubble. He looked out the window into the black void of the night sky. "His mother was my sister-in-law, Elena. She and my brother were killed yesterday morning in Palermo, a rival faction. They thought eliminating my brother's bloodline would weaken me." He turned his stormy eyes back to Chloe. "I barely got him out. They don't know he survived the blast." Chloe's breath hitched. She tightened her arms around the sleeping infant, suddenly horrified by the weight of the tragedy. "I'm so sorry." "In my world, sorrow is a luxury. Blood is the only currency," Gabriel replied, his voice devoid of emotion, though his eyes betrayed a profound weariness. "You saved him tonight. He would have dehydrated or worse, drawn attention we cannot afford when we land. I am in your debt, Chloe." He knew her name. Of course he did. His men had likely pulled the flight manifest the second she stood up. "You don't owe me anything," Chloe whispered firmly. "I did what any mother would do. When we land, you go your way, and I go back to my daughter. That's it." Gabriel didn't respond. He simply looked at her with an unreadable expression. It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't an agreement either. The descent into New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport was turbulent, battered by heavy crosswinds. Matteo stirred but didn't wake, lulled by Chloe's gentle rocking. As the wheels touched down on the tarmac, the reality of the situation crashed over Chloe. The surreal bubble of the airplane was popping. She had to go back to her life, her bills, her cramped apartment, her struggles. Because of Gabriel's status and the mechanical emergency of his private jet, his security team had arranged for the commercial airliner to bypass the standard international gate. Instead, the 777 was directed to taxi toward the remote stands near Signature Flight Support, the private aviation terminal. "We are deplaning first," Gabriel announced to the cabin, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket. The lethal aura instantly returned to him. He was no longer the grieving uncle. He was the boss. He reached down to take Matteo. Chloe gently handed the sleeping baby over, feeling a strange, hollow ache in her chest as the warmth left her arms. She watched Gabriel secure the carrier back to his chest. "Wait in your seat until we are clear," Dante ordered Chloe, tossing a thick stack of $100 bills onto her tray table. "For your trouble." Chloe bristled, shoving the money back toward the bodyguard. "I don't want your money. I didn't do it for cash." Gabriel paused at the front of the cabin, looking back at her. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. Leave the money, Dante. A woman like her cannot be bought. With that, the heavy cabin door was opened by the ground crew. The mobile stairs were already attached. Gabriel and his men stepped out into the biting New York night. Chloe exhaled a massive sigh of relief, sinking back into her seat. It was over. She had survived. But as she reached for her carry-on bag, a sharp, deafening crack echoed from outside. It wasn't a jet engine backfiring, it was a gunshot. Then came another. And another. Rapid, automatic fire tore through the silence of the tarmac. Screams erupted from the flight attendants in the galley. Chloe scrambled to the window, her blood running cold. Below, on the rain-slicked concrete, absolute chaos had erupted. The two black Cadillac Escalades waiting for Gabriel were riddled with bullet holes. A ground crew luggage cart had been turned sideways, and men in dark tactical gear were firing relentlessly at Gabriel's position. It was an ambush. The rival family had known where the commercial flight was landing. Chloe saw Dante fall, clutching his shoulder. She saw Gabriel, pinned behind the thick steel of the mobile staircase wheel, shielding Matteo with his own body. He was returning fire with a matte black handgun, but he was pinned down, unable to move to the armored vehicles without exposing the baby. Panic seized Chloe. She should stay down. She should hide under the seat. But suddenly, the gunfire paused as the attackers moved to flank Gabriel's position. Gabriel looked up, his eyes locking onto the illuminated window of the first-class cabin. He made eye contact with Chloe. In that split second, she saw the realization dawn on his face. The attackers were moving up the stairs. They were going to board the plane to get a better vantage point. Or worse, they knew there were witnesses. Before Chloe could process what was happening, the cabin door was thrown open. It wasn't the attackers. It was Gabriel. His suit was torn, his face smeared with grease, his eyes wild. He still had Matteo strapped to his chest, the baby now screaming in terror from the noise. He grabbed Chloe by the arm, his grip like a steel vise. "They saw you through the window," Gabriel roared over the sound of approaching sirens. "They saw you holding him. To them, you are my family now." "What?" Chloe screamed, trying to pull away. "No, I have a daughter. And if you stay here, Victor's men will butcher you to send me a message," Gabriel yelled, hauling her toward the exit. "You're coming with us. Now." The descent down the mobile staircase was a blur of deafening noise and blinding muzzle flashes. Gabriel's grip on Chloe's arm was bruising, pulling her with a force that lifted her feet off the rain-slicked metal steps. Below them, JFK's remote tarmac had become a war zone. The smell of aviation fuel mixed sickeningly with the metallic tang of blood and sulfur. "Keep your head down," Gabriel roared, pressing her against his side as a volley of bullets sparked against the steel railing, inches from their heads. Dante, clutching a bleeding shoulder, was laying down suppressive fire with a customized Glock 19, giving them a 3-second window. Gabriel shoved Chloe toward the only surviving vehicle, a black Mercedes-Benz G63 AMG. Its reinforced B6 level ballistic glass was already spider-webbed from impact, but the engine was roaring. Gabriel threw open the heavy armored door and pushed Chloe into the back seat, diving in right after her. Matteo, still strapped to his chest, let out a terrified wail as Gabriel shielded the infant with his broad back. Dante threw himself into the passenger seat, blood pooling on the pristine leather, while a young, terrified-looking driver slammed the accelerator. The 3-ton SUV lurched forward, its tires screaming against the wet concrete. It smashed through a chain-link security gate at 50 miles an hour, the metal tearing with a horrific screech. "Get us on the Van Wyck now," Gabriel barked, his eyes scanning the dark perimeter. "And call the cleaner crew. I want this locked down before the NYPD and Port Authority realize what just happened." Chloe was hyperventilating, her back pressed against the opposite door. She touched her face, her hands were shaking violently. She looked at Gabriel, who was calmly unstrapping the baby carrier, his face an emotionless mask. He checked Matteo, ensuring the baby hadn't been hit by flying glass, before turning his dark, stormy eyes to her. "Are you hit?" he demanded. "No," Chloe stammered, her voice cracking. Panic finally broke through her shock. "You kidnapped me. You dragged me into a shootout. I have a daughter. Lily. Oh God, Lily." Gabriel's expression hardened. "Listen to me, Chloe. The men shooting at us work for Victor Moretti. He runs the most ruthless rival syndicate on the East Coast. They knew exactly which flight I was on, which means I have a leak in my inner circle. And they saw you. He leaned closer, the scent of cordite clinging to his ruined Italian suit. They saw you holding my nephew in that window. To Victor, you aren't a bystander anymore. You are a vulnerability. If I had left you on that plane, you would be dead before morning, and they would have used your phone to find your family. The words hit Chloe like a physical blow. Her stomach plummeted. My mother. Lily is with my mother in Astoria, 31st Avenue. If they know who I am. Dante! Gabriel snapped, not breaking eye contact with Chloe. Dante, pale and sweating through his jacket, pulled out an encrypted satellite phone. Boss? Dispatch Bravo team to Astoria, 31st Avenue. Find Chloe's mother and her daughter. Get them out of the apartment and bring them to the Sands Point estate. Shoot anyone who gets in the way. Gabriel looked back at Chloe. What is your mother's name? Martha. Chloe choked out, tears finally spilling over her lashes. Martha Davis. Please, they don't know anything. They're innocent. Innocence doesn't stop bullets, Chloe. But my men will. Gabriel pulled a burner phone from his pocket and crushed it in his massive hand, tossing the pieces onto the floorboard. From this moment on, your life as you knew it is suspended. Until Victor Moretti is put in the ground, you belong to me. The drive out of Queens was a masterclass in tactical evasion. The driver took them off the main highways, weaving through the industrial back streets of College Point to avoid the massive police response flooding toward JFK. The flashing red and blue lights painted the night sky in the rearview mirror, but the armored Mercedes slipped away into the shadows of the Long Island Expressway. In the back seat, the silence was agonizing. Mateo, exhausted from the terror, had fallen into a fitful sleep against Gabriel's chest. Chloe stared out the window, watching the rain streak the ballistic glass. She had boarded a flight in London, hoping for a better job to pay for Lily's preschool. Now, she was a prisoner of a mafia war, praying her mother and daughter wouldn't be murdered in their sleep. 50 minutes later, the SUV turned off a secluded, tree-lined road in Sands Point, Long Island. Massive wrought iron gates swung open, revealing a sprawling, fortress-like stone estate situated on a cliff overlooking the Long Island Sound. Armed men patrolled the perimeter with Belgian Malinois attack dogs. The car stopped beneath a grand portico. Gabriel stepped out, holding Mateo, and waited for Chloe. Welcome to my home, Gabriel said, his voice flat. Do not try to run. The perimeter is electrified, and my men shoot first. As long as you are inside, you are safe. Chloe stepped out into the freezing wind, wrapping her arms around herself. She looked at the stone mansion, then at the mob boss holding the fragile infant. She had survived the flight, but she was stepping into a completely different kind of hell. The interior of the Sands Point estate was breathtakingly beautiful, a stark contrast to the violence that governed its owner's life. Vaulted ceilings, priceless Renaissance art, and dark mahogany woodwork gave it the feel of a museum. But to Chloe, it was merely a gilded cage. Gabriel led her up a grand, sweeping staircase to the east wing. This will be your suite, he said, opening a heavy oak door to a massive bedroom overlooking the ocean. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. A private physician is arriving in 10 minutes to treat Dante. He will examine Mateo, and if you require it, you as well. Chloe ignored the opulent surroundings. She stood in the center of the Persian rug, her eyes burning with unshed tears. I don't care about the room. I don't care about the clothes. Have your men reached my mother yet? Gabriel checked his watch, an ultra-rare Patek Philippe that looked out of place against his blood-stained cuff. Bravo team is 10 minutes out from Astoria. Traffic on the RFK bridge delayed them. They will secure them, Chloe. He walked over to a massive four-poster bed and gently laid Mateo down in the center. The baby stirred, his little face scrunching up, preparing to cry. Chloe's maternal instinct overrode her fear. She moved past Gabriel, her shoulder brushing his solid chest, and scooped the baby up before he could fully wake. She rocked him gently, humming a low, soothing lullaby. Mateo settled instantly, nuzzling his face into her neck. Gabriel watched her, his stormy eyes tracking her every movement. The ruthless Don, the man who had just shot 3 men on an airport tarmac without blinking, looked entirely captivated by the domestic scene unfolding in his bedroom. You have a gift, Gabriel murmured, the harshness completely gone from his voice. It's not a gift, it's motherhood, Chloe replied sharply, refusing to let him see how terrified she was. You ripped this child from everything he knows. and you ripped me from my daughter. The least I can do is keep him from suffering your mistakes." Gabriel's jaw tightened, a muscle feathering under his cheekbone. Anyone else would have a bullet in their head for speaking to him like that. My brother's death was not a mistake. It was a declaration of war, and I will burn New York to the ground to finish it. But you, he paused, taking a step closer. The sheer, overwhelming gravity of his presence made Chloe's breath hitch. You chose to step into the crossfire on that plane. Why? Chloe looked up at him, her chin jutting out defiantly. Because I couldn't watch a baby starve, while a room full of grown men with guns panicked. I saved him. I didn't sign up for your war. A knock on the door interrupted them. A tall, distinguished-looking man with silver hair entered carrying a black medical bag. It was Dr. Sterling, the Rossi family's private surgeon. He took one look at Gabriel's ruined suit and sighed. "Dante is in the medical bay downstairs, Gabriel," Dr. Sterling said, walking over. "The bullet passed clean through the deltoid. He'll live. Let me look at the child." Chloe reluctantly handed Mateo over to the doctor. As Sterling performed a rapid but thorough examination, checking the infant's vitals and pupils, Gabriel stepped out onto the balcony, pressing a secure earpiece into his ear. 10 minutes passed in agonizing suspense. Dr. Sterling pronounced Mateo perfectly healthy, though slightly dehydrated and traumatized. "He needs to eat, Gabriel," the doctor said as the Don stepped back into the room. "The formula shipment you requested hasn't arrived. The supply lines are locked down because of the hit." Gabriel looked at Chloe. The unspoken request hung heavy in the air. Chloe sighed, exhaustion seeping into her bones. "I'll feed him. Give me some privacy." Dr. Sterling nodded and left the room. Gabriel lingered for a moment, his gaze fixed on Chloe. "Thank you," he said quietly, before closing the door behind him. Alone in the opulent room, Chloe sat in a velvet armchair and brought Mateo to her breast. The baby latched hungrily, the trauma of the night fading into the quiet, rhythmic sound of his feeding. Chloe leaned her head back, closing her eyes, silently praying for her mother and daughter. Ring. The sharp sound of the heavy brass telephone on the bedside table made Chloe jump. She stared at it. Gabriel had said the house was on lockdown. Why would the phone in her room be ringing? Carefully holding Mateo, she stood and walked to the nightstand. She picked up the heavy receiver. "Hello?" she whispered. "Listen to me very carefully, Chloe Davis." A cold, raspy voice echoed through the line. The accent was thick, sharp, and terrifying. "You are in a house of ghosts. Gabriel Rossi cannot protect you. He couldn't protect his brother in Milan, and he won't protect you." Chloe's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "I am the man who is going to end the Rossi bloodline," Victor Moretti purred. "But I have a proposition for you, a mother for a mother." "What are you talking about?" Chloe gasped, clutching the baby tighter. "Gabriel sent a team to Astoria, 31st Avenue, 3rd floor, apartment 3B, Victor said, and Chloe stopped breathing. He knew the exact address. "His men are too late. My people are already there. Your mother and your little girl, Lily. They are currently sitting on their couch, keeping my men company." "No!" Chloe screamed, a raw, primal sound tearing from her throat. "No, please, don't hurt them. She's just a little girl." "They are perfectly safe." "For now," Victor replied smoothly. "But their safety depends entirely on you. You have something I want, the Rossi boy." I can't," Chloe sobbed, looking down at the innocent baby feeding in her arms. "You will," Victor commanded. "There is a service door in the East Wing kitchens. It leads to the cliffside path. Tomorrow night, at exactly 2 a.m., you will wrap that baby up, walk out that door, and hand him to my men. If you do, your mother and daughter will be waiting in a car to take you far away. You get your family back, I get the Rossi heir. Gabriel has guards everywhere," Chloe wept, panic threatening to pull her under. "He'll kill me." "Gabriel is a dead man walking," Victor laughed darkly. "How do you think I knew his flight? How do you think I knew what room you are in right now? I have eyes inside his house, Chloe. The man closest to him is my man. If you tell Gabriel about this call, my mole will know. And the moment you betray me, I will have my men in Astoria slit your daughter's throat." The line went dead. Chloe dropped the phone, sinking to her knees on the thick Persian rug. Mateo, startled by her sudden movement, began to cry. But Chloe couldn't soothe him. Her vision was blurring, the walls of the gilded cage spinning violently around her. Victor Moretti had her family, and the only way to save her 2-year-old daughter was to betray the terrifying mob boss downstairs and hand an innocent infant over to a monster. And worse, someone inside Gabriel's inner circle, someone in this very house, was the traitor. The bedroom door suddenly flew open. Gabriel stood in the frame, a heavy Sig Sauer pistol gripped in his right hand, his face pale and eyes burning with a lethal fury. "Bravo team just reported back from Astoria," Gabriel said, his voice trembling with a rage that seemed to lower the temperature of the room. The apartment was empty. The door was kicked in. Chloe looked up at him, the phone still dangling off the hook beside her, Victor's impossible ultimatum echoing in her mind. Chloe's heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stared at the dangling phone receiver, its low, rhythmic beeping sounding like a countdown to her daughter's execution. Gabriel stood in the doorway, the Sig Sauer heavy in his hand, his eyes burning with a violent intensity that threatened to consume the entire room. "Who was on the phone, Chloe?" Gabriel demanded, stepping into the room. His gaze flicked from her pale face to the receiver swinging gently against the mahogany nightstand. The air in the room plummeted by 10 degrees. Panic seized her throat. Victor's raspy voice echoed in her skull. "I have eyes inside his house. The moment you betray me, I will have my men in Astoria slit your daughter's throat." She couldn't tell him, not out in the open, not when the man who had betrayed the Rossi syndicate could be standing right outside the door. I panicked," Chloe stammered, forcing a sob from her chest that wasn't entirely fake. The sheer terror she felt for Lily made the tears flow freely. "I picked it up to call 911. I just wanted to send the police to my mother's house, but I couldn't remember how to dial out from a hotel-style phone. And when you opened the door, I dropped it. Please, Gabriel, where are they? Where is my baby?" Gabriel searched her face for a long, terrifying moment. The cold calculation in his stormy eyes made her skin prickle. He was a man who made his living detecting lies. But the raw, unadulterated fear radiating from Chloe was undeniable. It masked the deception perfectly. Slowly, Gabriel lowered the weapon. He walked over, picked up the receiver, and placed it back on the cradle. Victor's men got there first. The front door of the apartment on 31st Avenue was breached. But there was no blood, Chloe, no struggle. They took them alive. "They want leverage." "Leverage," Chloe repeated hollowly, her knees buckling. She slumped against the edge of the velvet armchair. Mateo, sensing the sudden shift in her energy, began to fuss, his tiny fists waving in the air. "I have 50 men tearing through Queens and Brooklyn right now," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a low, deadly rumble. "I have the port authorities bribed, and the local NYPD precincts on my payroll, looking the other way while we hunt. We will find them." "You don't understand," Chloe whispered, her mind racing. She had to get him alone, truly alone, and she had to do it now. "I need to wash him. Mateo." He threw up a little of the formula on his onesie. "I need to run a warm bath for him." Gabriel frowned, the sudden pivot in the conversation, throwing him off balance. "The staff can handle that." "No," Chloe snapped, her maternal ferocity flashing through the fear. "No staff. I don't want anyone else touching him right now. Please, just come with me. Show me how the water works in that massive bathroom." "I'm shaking." Gabriel hesitated, then nodded. He holstered his weapon at the small of his back and gestured toward the ensuite bathroom. It was a cavernous space of floor-to-ceiling white marble, featuring a massive walk-in rain shower and a sunken, soaking tub. "Turn on the shower," Chloe instructed softly as soon as the heavy oak door clicked shut behind them. Gabriel looked at her, his dark brows drawing together. "He needs a bath, not a shower." "Turn it all the way up, Gabriel. Hot. Now," Chloe insisted, her voice trembling but resolute. Realization dawned in Gabriel's eyes. In his world, running water was the oldest and most reliable countermeasure against hidden listening devices. He reached into the glass enclosure and turned the heavy chrome dials to the maximum. A roar of high-pressure water hit the marble floor, instantly filling the room with thick, white steam. Chloe stepped close to him, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest beneath his ruined dress shirt. She kept Mateo securely between them. "They called me," she whispered, her lips barely an inch from his ear to be heard over the rushing water. "Victor Moretti. He called this room just before you walked in. Gabriel's body went completely rigid, every muscle in his broad frame locked into place like steel. What did he say? He has my mother and Lily, Chloe breathed, a tear slipping down her cheek and mixing with the condensation in the room. He knows everything. He knew my room number. He knew about the flight. He told me that there is a mole inside your house, the man closest to you. A dangerous, lethal silence fell over Gabriel despite the roar of the shower, his jaw locked. He gave me an ultimatum, Chloe continued, her voice breaking. Tomorrow night, 2 a.m., I am supposed to take Mateo out the service door in the East Wing kitchens. If I hand the baby over to his men on the cliffside path, they will give me my family back. If I tell you, or if I don't show up, he said his men in Astoria will kill my daughter. Gabriel closed his eyes. When he opened them, the storm within them was a hurricane of calculated violence. Only 5 people knew the exact flight we were on. Only 3 people knew I put you in the East Wing. Dante, Chloe whispered, the horrifying realization clicking into place. In the car, when we were running from the airport, you asked me for my mother's address. I said 31st Avenue. Dante was the one who called Bravo Team on the satellite phone. Gabriel's chest heaved. He didn't just call Bravo Team. He tipped off Victor's men in Queens. He gave them a 10-minute head start to secure your family before my men arrived. The gunshot wound at JFK, it was a grazing shot. A setup to make him look like a casualty so he wouldn't be suspected. Gabriel, what do I do? Chloe sobbed, gripping his shirt. I can't give Mateo to them. They'll kill him. But if I don't, Lily dies. I'm just a mother. I can't outplay the mafia. Gabriel reached up, his large, rough hand gently cupping the side of her face. His thumb brushed away a tear. The gesture was shockingly tender for a man composed entirely of violence. You don't have to outplay them, Chloe, Gabriel murmured, his voice a low, steady vow over the noise of the shower. You just have to trust me. Victor thinks he holds all the cards because he thinks I am blind to the snake in my house. But you just gave me my eyes back. If Victor finds out, He won't, Gabriel interrupted smoothly. Victor Moretti wants a trade at 2 in the morning. We will give him exactly what he asked for. But he is going to learn a very painful lesson about taking what is mine. I am not yours, Chloe said, her voice shaking. Gabriel looked down at her, his eyes tracing the line of her jaw, the fierce, protective way she held his nephew, and the absolute bravery it took to tell him the truth when betrayal would have been easier. You saved my blood on that plane, Gabriel whispered, the heat of his words rivaling the steam in the room. You are under my roof. That makes you mine to protect. By tomorrow night, Dante will be dead, Victor will be in hell, and your daughter will be back in your arms. I swear it on my brother's grave. The hours leading up to 2 a.m. were a waking nightmare. Chloe moved through the motions of caring for Mateo, acutely aware that she was being watched. Every time she stepped out of the bedroom into the hallway, Dante was there. His arm was in a sling, his dark eyes tracking her with a hollow, predatory calmness. He thought he had won. He thought the terrified single mother was perfectly under his thumb. At 1:45 a.m., the sprawling Sands Point estate was tomb silent. Outside, a heavy coastal fog had rolled in off the Long Island Sound, blanketing the cliffside in a thick, eerie gray mist. Chloe stood in her bedroom, her heart hammering against her ribs like a jackhammer. She wore a dark wool coat she had found in the closet. In her arms, she held a thick blue baby blanket, tightly swaddled around a bundle that perfectly mimicked the size and weight of a 6-month-old infant. The real Mateo was safely locked inside Gabriel's subterranean panic room, guarded by the 3 men Gabriel still trusted with his life. Taking a deep breath, Chloe opened her bedroom door. The hallway was empty. She moved silently down the grand staircase, her socks padding softly against the marble. She navigated the shadowed corridors toward the sprawling industrial kitchens of the East Wing. As she reached the heavy stainless steel service door, a shadow detached itself from the wall. Right on time, Dante whispered, stepping into the dim moonlight, filtering through the high windows. His good hand rested on the grip of his holstered weapon. You're a smart girl, Chloe. Keep your mouth shut, make the trade, and you get to go back to your pathetic little life. Chloe swallowed hard, forcing her hands to tremble as she clutched the bundle tighter. Just make sure my daughter is safe. Victor is a man of his word, Dante sneered. He reached out and unbolted the heavy deadbolt. Go. The path leads straight down to the private beach access. They are waiting by the water. Chloe pushed the heavy door open and stepped out into the freezing, salt-laced air. The fog was so thick she could barely see 10 feet in front of her. The roar of the ocean crashing against the rocky shoreline below masked the sound of her footsteps. She walked down the winding stone path, the darkness pressing in on her from all sides. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to run, but the image of Lily's smiling face forced her to keep walking into the abyss. At the bottom of the cliff, the path opened up onto a narrow strip of rocky beach. 2 black SUVs with their headlights off were parked near the water's edge. 4 men in dark tactical gear stood around the vehicles, holding suppressed submachine guns. And there, standing in the center, was Victor Moretti. He was an older man, dressed in an immaculate overcoat, leaning heavily on a silver-tipped cane. Beside him, 2 of his enforcers were holding a terrified, weeping woman. It was Martha, Chloe's mother. And clutched in Martha's arms, crying out into the cold night air, was 2-year-old Lily. "Mommy!" Lily shrieked, struggling against her grandmother's grip as she saw Chloe emerge from the fog. "Lily! Mom!" Chloe screamed, surging forward. "Hold it right there," Victor barked, raising his cane and pointing it at Chloe. "Not another step. Let me see the boy." Chloe stopped, her entire body shaking violently. She held the blue bundle out in front of her. "Let them go first. Send them up the path. Then I'll hand him to you." Victor laughed, a dry, rasping sound that barely cut over the crashing waves. "You are in no position to negotiate, little bird. Dante assured me the estate was asleep, but I don't take chances. Give me the Rossi boy now, or I blow your mother's brains out and take the girl to raise as my own." Chloe felt a cold sweat break out over her neck. This was it, the moment of truth. If Gabriel's plan failed, she was about to die, and her family with her. "Here," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a dead, hollow whisper. "Take him." She tossed the blue bundle directly at Victor. Victor's men instinctively lowered their weapons to catch the precious cargo. One of the enforcers caught the blanket and hastily ripped it open to reveal the heir to the Rossi empire. Instead of a baby, a heavy 5-pound dumbbell from the estate's gym, wrapped in a heated towel, clattered to the rocky ground. Victor's face contorted in shock. "What is this? Where is the—" "Down!" a voice roared from the cliffs above. It was Gabriel. Before Victor's men could raise their weapons, the fog erupted in a deafening symphony of gunfire. Gabriel had not been asleep. He and his most elite, loyal enforcers had slipped out through a hidden coastal tunnel an hour ago, scaling the treacherous cliffside in the dark to take up sniper positions in the rocks directly above the beach. 2 of Victor's men dropped instantly, their bodies hitting the sand before the echo of the high-powered rifles even registered. "Get in the car!" Victor screamed, scrambling behind the armored door of the nearest SUV. The enforcer holding Martha and Lily panicked. He raised his handgun, aiming blindly into the fog, dragging the screaming woman and child backward toward the water. From the shadows of the rocks directly beside Chloe, a massive figure vaulted forward. Gabriel Rossi moved with a terrifying, predatory speed. He didn't use a rifle. He closed the distance in 3 massive strides, tackling the enforcer to the ground before the man could pull the trigger. The 2 men crashed into the freezing surf. A brutal, breathless struggle ensued in the dark water. Chloe didn't wait. She lunged forward, grabbing Martha and Lily, shielding their bodies with her own as more bullets sparked against the vehicles. "Mommy," Lily sobbed, burying her face in Chloe's neck. "I've got you, baby. I've got you," Chloe wept, clutching her daughter so tightly her arms ached. A sharp crack echoed from the water, followed by a heavy splash. A second later, Gabriel rose from the surf, soaking wet, blood dripping from a cut above his eye, his chest heaving. The enforcer did not get up. Up on the cliffside path, the heavy service door banged open. Dante sprinted down the stone steps, his pistol drawn, realizing the trap had been sprung. He aimed down at the beach, looking for Gabriel. But Gabriel was already waiting. With cold, surgical precision, the Don raised his Sig Sauer and fired a single shot. Dante's body jerked backward, tumbling violently down the stone stairs until he came to a stop at the bottom, his dead eyes staring up at the foggy night sky. The traitor was dead. Victor Moretti's SUV tore backward, its tires spinning wildly in the sand as he abandoned his men and fled into the night. Silence slowly fell over the beach, save for the sound of the ocean and the frantic sobbing of Chloe's mother. The estate guards swarmed the beach, securing the perimeter. Gabriel holstered his weapon and walked slowly over to where Chloe sat on the wet stones, clutching her family. He looked exhausted, bloodied, and more dangerous than ever. But as he looked down at Chloe, the hardness in his face melted away. He dropped to one knee on the wet rocks. Gently, hesitantly, he reached out and placed a large, scarred hand on top of Lily's tiny head. The little girl looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, but she didn't shrink away. "Are you hurt?" Gabriel asked, his voice rough with emotion. "No," Chloe breathed, looking up into the stormy eyes of the man who had dragged her into hell, only to carry her safely out of it. "We're safe. You saved them. You saved my family first," Gabriel replied quietly, his thumb gently brushing a streak of dirt from Chloe's cheek. "The debt is paid, but my vow remains." He stood up, offering her his hand. "Victor is running, but he won't get far. My men are waiting on the main road. This war ends tonight. Come inside, Chloe. It's cold." Chloe looked at his outstretched hand. She knew exactly what taking it meant. It meant stepping permanently out of the ordinary world and into his. It meant trading her cramped queen's apartment for a fortress, and her quiet life for one shielded by shadows and loyalty. She had boarded a plane as a desperate single mother. She was leaving it as the only woman who held the heart of the most powerful man in the city. With a trembling breath, she reached up and placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, solid, and completely unbreakable. Do you love thrilling, real-life inspired drama that keeps you entirely on the edge of your seat? The underworld is full of hidden stories of survival, betrayal, and unexpected love, just like Chloe and Gabriel's. If this intense mafia romance had your heart racing, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button to let us know you want more dark, gripping storytelling. Make sure to share this video with your friends who are obsessed with suspenseful romance and mob drama. Most importantly, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our next thrilling chapter. The story is just beginning, and you won't believe what we have coming next. Drop a comment below, would you have made the same choice Chloe did to save the boss's baby? Let us know.